Well, I don't want to waste any more time here. So without further ado, I'll bring in the man himself, Mr. Brian Buffini. Brian, thanks for taking the time today to dive into this topic. I know it's hot on everyone's minds right now. And, I just realized before we started, it's April Fool's Day, but we are not joking around here today. It's a very serious topic that we're going to get into.
Yeah, well, thanks, DJ. I think April Fool's Day is appropriate because of all the lawsuits I've seen in my 38 years in real estate. The fact that this one broke through is interesting. I have no doubt that the real estate function for years, the commission structure even, I think at times has been inefficient. You have 1.6 million members of the National Association of Realtors, another million people with real estate licenses, unaffiliated. And I would say that there's 2.5 million people, 2.6 million people in real estate of some sort. There has been sometimes less than professional behavior and some things that we've been speaking out against for 28 years. To be pros, to serve your customers, to exceed expectations, to do such a great job for people, you get referrals, which is why our average client makes 10 times that of the typical agent. It was interesting to me that the Department of Justice decided to go after an industry where the average agent makes less than $40,000 a year. It's been interesting to me with the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that are given to the politicians that to ensure things such as like mortgage interest relief and things like that, that somehow that's all been abandoned. And this particular lawsuit, and I'm going to talk about the history of it, how it broke through, of all the ones that could have helped the real estate business, this is not the one. But this is the one that got passed, and it is April Fool's Day. And I mentioned the politics. I've been in the real estate business since 1986 as a practitioner for almost 10 years, and now 28 years doing this here on the training side. I've been negotiating commissions for 38 years. I've been teaching people for 28 years how to negotiate their fees. But all of a sudden, every major news outlet and everything is about, hey, real estate commissions are finally negotiable. And I have no idea where that narrative has come from. And I'm going to quote, and I never, you know me, Derek, you've worked for me, how long?
17 years.
Have you ever heard me make political statements of any sort? Never. And this isn't a presidential one or picking on a candidate or whatever else. This is just to show you, it's on every major news outlet. It's on every major, everywhere news is reported, real estate. The end of real estate as we know it. And the President of the United States last week, here was his statement. I'm going to quote him directly. It said, last week, the National Association of Realtors agreed for the first time that Americans can now negotiate lower commissions when they buy or sell a home. And he got a big round of applause. On a typical home purchase, that alone could save folks on average $10,000 on the sale of a purchase. Another big round of applause. I'm calling on realtors to follow through on lowering their commissions to protect home buyers. So now it's a political, it's got, you get, and when a politician gets applause, here we go. I'm just going to say that real estate agents have had this two approaches to this. Kind of, hey, this is all going to blow over. This stuff's happened before. We'll just get back to business as usual. And then you have other people who are just running around chickens with their head cut off. Everything's done. It's over. We're the travel agency business, and so on and so forth. And so neither one of those attitudes is really going to hold up because there's a radical difference between the real estate business and the travel agency business. Yeah, you can book a flight and you can book a hotel room, but there's anywhere from 60 to 80 tasks involved in the typical buyer representation. And it's like, okay, great. Buyers no longer need to be represented. And I was a defendant in the Chicago case. So I was pinned against this for an 8-hour deposition myself. And so ultimately, there's some very strange things happened here. The bottom line is the rulings have come down. The court case happened. This is now the future. And so we're going to get down the path here to explain things. So I'm going to cover 4 things today. I normally have 3 points. I'm going to cover 4. I'm going to take a little bit more time than I normally do, and then I'll get to your questions. So I'm going to talk about how did we get here, and a little bit of the history. I'm going to talk about terms of the settlement. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to give you some lawyerese, and then in future broadcasts, we're going to share some things about, how this settlement's working and all that kind of good stuff. We're also going to talk about best practices. We're going to share with you how to make presentations and do all that kind of stuff to serve your customers well. I'm going to talk about there's a season of chaos coming, and then we'll talk about the pathway forward, okay? So how did we get here? Well, there is an attorney named Doug Miller, and I've been aware of this guy for a long time. He spent 40 years pursuing his goal of changing the commission structure in real estate. And so he's a real estate attorney, right? So hey, I close deals for $1,500. I don't see why a realtor can't do that. And these lawsuits always happen after a raging hot market, right? So we came from a season post-COVID where you're getting 20 offers over a weekend, and sometimes that was, well over asking price. And people are like, hey, what did my realtor do? Like, they got big commissions, and they didn't seem to do a lot. They didn't seem to have a lot of time invested. The deal closed in 25 days from soup to nuts. And, there was a lot of fees paid. And then on top of that, there's a confusing structure of how listing broker takes the commission. He splits his fees with the buyer's agent. So that to the consumer was like, it never quite gelled how that worked. Hey, when I have an attorney, I pay for an attorney. Where they've come to is this always happens in the hot market. And then as soon as the market gets tough, the value of the agent and everything that's involved in selling a home becomes more apparent. So this guy, Doug Miller, has been trying, I don't know how many lawsuits he's filed over the years, but he finally brought the case to a Washington-based company, Cohen Milstein, which have over 100 lawyers, and they're known for suing big companies and banks and that kind of stuff. So, and then we ended up with this ruling, which many people are now hearing about or have been following, the Sitzer-Burnett case. It's a class action lawsuit filed in Missouri federal court by a group of home sellers against NAR and other defendants. And so a little backdrop on it. Missouri is the best place to bring a class action lawsuit, 8-person jury instead of 12. It was one of the largest jury selection processes in the history of the state of Missouri. Like I said, I was deposed in this situation from the Chicago case. I have friends and business partners who were in the courtroom watching this thing come down. And one of the observations were that the courtroom was stacked with a whole bunch of people that were sympathetic to the cause of, what the plaintiffs were bringing. The defendants had some very high-powered, pricey attorneys in the room, a lot of attorneys in the room. And you had these folks from Missouri that were just sitting here going, okay, what's up? And there was some theatrics in the lawsuit. There was some good gamesmanship, you would say. There was a gotcha video played, which hadn't been disclosed, which was an interview of Alan Dalton, who had started Realtor.com, had been an executive in other real estate companies. So he looked like an authority figure, and he's in this podcast, and he's kind of telling this behind the scenes, kind of almost like a dirty joke that should never be told in public. And it did certainly not put the real estate business in any good light. It was kind of crude. And this was shown, of course, at the time, the attorney's like, hey, this is a mistrial. You can't show this stuff. But one observant said, the energy in the whole building changed after that. And I'm not saying this lawsuit was the only merits of it was this goofy video. And it's out there on the internet. You can find it. I'm sure someone will post it today themselves. But it didn't help. It didn't help. And all of a sudden, consumers are going, oh, is that what the real estate industry thinks of us? Is that how they view us? And so off to the races we went. And bottom line is, once a jury makes a decision, once a judge comes down with a number, now the merits of the case. I mean, some of the stuff they were asking me about, commissions are not negotiable. Absolutely not true. A buyer's agent really doesn't do anything because people can find a house online themselves. Give me a break. Give me a break. Yeah, a lot of people find houses themselves today, for sure. That's the beginning of the process. That's like a lot of people get pregnant, but they still go to a doctor and a midwife, and they got to deliver a baby. And so, but once the settlement came down, the game changed. The merits of the case no longer mattered. The reasoning of the case no longer mattered. And many, many realtors are really frustrated at the National Association of Realtors and why they settled. And I'm not an apologist for NAR. I don't know why this thing got here. But once that $1.78 billion judgment came down, in order to appeal the case, they have to file a bond. And the bond has to be up to 3 times the amount of the judgment, which is, $5 billion. And it would have bankrupted the National Association of Realtors to pay those fees. So NAR could not go to appeal. They felt like the case hadn't have that strong of a case. I can tell you, I talked to leaders inside the National Association of Realtors, and none of them thought they were going to lose this case, to be honest with you. I didn't think so. Well, I had some different opinions on it, but I felt like it was a defendable case because I defended myself. And so in our organization. So once the judgment came down, game over. Now NAR has to settle. Once NAR settles, now all of a sudden all the publicly traded real estate companies need to settle. Why? Because nothing hammers publicly traded stock more than a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit hanging over a company. So Remax settled for $55 million. Compass settled for $57.5. Anywhere Real Estate, which many people who are not in those brands don't know, that's Caldwell Banker, Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, ERA, Sotheby's, Corcoran. They paid $83.5 million. Their CEO even got a bonus for settling the case. Privately held Keller Williams settled for $70 million. And Home Services America, right, which is under Berkshire Hathaway, has yet to settle because they set aside those guys. And they're very, very strategic. They basically went after every company's 40% of their available cash. That was kind of the formula. 40% of your available cash. And Berkshire Hathaway obviously has a lot of cash. And so I'm just giving you my take. This is one man's opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I find it interesting that nobody was talking about the lawyer's fees for 33%. Nobody seems to talk about that. The DOJ is not going to talk about that. Congress isn't going to talk about that. Why? Because they're all lawyers. And so an industry that makes $40,000 got stuck to the wall for being this usurious commissions involved. And yet we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in this case. And so I'm gonna go over a little bit right now the terms of the settlement, okay? And don't shoot the messenger. I'm just delivering the news. I will tell you, if you're of the opinion that, hey, it's all going back to the way it was, we'll just find other ways. Oh, we've been signed buyer's agreements in the past. It's no big deal. The real estate business, as we know, will functionally change forever. And the negotiations involved will functionally change forever. And the practice will change. And people will leave the business. And real estate companies will consolidate. And the National Association of Realtors will be under tremendous pressure for its own viability. MLSs all across the country. There's hundreds and hundreds of MLSs. I'm not sure they're all going to survive. So it is a landmark decision. There's tremendous amount of consequences, many of which are unintended. And by the way, I'm sitting here looking at it today, and I'm going to walk through this. This is not a win for the consumer, and I'll walk you through this. I don't know how the consumer comes out better in this. So anyhow, it is what it is. We got to deal with it and walk through it. So let me walk you through. NAR settled out of the $1.78 billion. They settled for $480 million. And they were like, hey, we got to do this. We feel like there's potential copycat cases. They wanted to cover their membership, and they're going to pay it out over 4 years. Over a million NAR members are released from the liability nationwide. The exception is agents affiliated with Home Services America, because that could happen any day. There could be a settlement. There's a court case in January, but I believe the settlement will happen long before that. The release doesn't cover brokerage. There's like almost somewhere between 87 and 90 brokerages, basically companies over $2 billion in sales in 2022. NAR tried to cover those. The agents in those companies are covered, but the brokerages themselves. So it's just a chance for some more money. NAR obviously admits no wrongdoing and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, who cares? Who cares? I know that's a big deal to the lawyers and all that type of stuff. But in the great practice of things, lawsuit was filed. The other guys played a better game. DOJ is involved. It's now political. Every headline, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN, CNBC, Fox Business. Hey, we can save money. No big deal. Many of the people who are pundits in the media live in New York City, which is one of those strangest real estate markets in the world, by the way, one of the most unique markets in the world. And people are like, hey, I represented myself buying my apartment. And it's just radically different than real estate in the rest of the world, okay? And the rest of the country. And so it's just not even close. It's not even close. So here are basically the three main takeaways. I'm going to give you a slide here just to kind of show you. The first major deal is offers of compensation. So using the MLS to communicate offers of compensation will no longer be an option. There will continue to be many ways in which buyer brokers could be compensated, including offers of compensation communicated off MLS. Compensation will continue to be negotiable, which is what it always has been, and should always be negotiated between agents and the consumers they're served. So number one, And again, I'm watching, and I know people have come up with some creative ways to put the cooperating compensation into the MLS. Don't mess with it. Don't play with it. You will get in trouble. There is no more offers of compensation put through the MLS. Period. Okay, so that has to end. Written representation agreement. The settlement provides that MLS participants with buyers must enter into representation agreement with those buyers. Now, this has always been a best practice. It's now just mandatory. And so, I've been doing this since I was selling real estate, okay? A lot of times it was an afterthought. 16 states already have this buyer-broker agreement. It's now going to be everywhere. And anytime you represent a buyer up front, you are going to have to sign a buyer-broker agreement, and we'll get into the details of it. The fees that you're going to command need to be stipulated in the buyer's broker agreement up front the day you meet the buyer. Again, it's going to require people to be able to be skilled, communicate, articulate, and some people are going to say, yeah, I'm just going to go do it myself. And that's why I don't know that the market's going to win in this. I don't think the consumer's going to win in this. So the three types of compensation available to buyer brokers will continue to take multiple forms depending on broker-consumer negotiations, including but not limited to fixed commissions paid directly by consumers so the buyer can pay themselves, concessions from the sellers. We're going to talk about concessions today. A portion of the listing broker's compensation, and then compensation will continue to be negotiable and always be negotiated between agents and the consumers they serve. Basically nothing new. Now, what I will say, there's no doubt there's been some poor agents in the marketplace who say, hey, I'm representing you and you don't even have to pay me. My services are free. Your services were never free. Never the case. Nobody works for free. That's the whole premise of why I think the lawsuit was stupid. And what they're thinking now is, okay, we're going to represent buyers for free? Not a chance. Who's reasonable would expect someone to work for free? In what reasonable mind would that be? And so, but we use those phrases. Certain realtors use those phrases. Very poor choice of words. And that was one of the alarm bells. The consumers went, hang on a second here. I'm paying both sides of the fees here. Why is that? Now, it was paid because the prices were, the fees were put into the price of the home. That's why. And there was a heck of a lot of work to be done. And people need to be represented. I found it fascinating that the very lawyers, when I talked to them, I said, what you're asking for is you want to control the fees, and nobody controls your fees, by the way. And then secondly, you want one side of the transaction represented, not the other. And you think that's going to save costs, and that's going to save people money. One person's going to be represented and the other's not. That's what is kind of one of the aftershocks of this ruling, okay, in my opinion. So I believe we're going to be heading for, in the interim, again, I got some happy news coming, but in the interim, we're going to have a season of chaos. And the season of chaos for me is, first of all, the timing. They're talking about ratifying this decision in court mid-July. And everyone I talk to says it's going to happen. Okay? Which means every purchase contract, all mortgage underwriting, everything in the MLS, the way the entire business has to be torn up in the next couple of months and start over. Here's some, we didn't think about this. And this is proof that this was not consumer-driven. FHA and VA loans. They limit the amount of closing costs that can be provided and have stipulations where they can go. For example, buyer concessions, seller concessions to pay a realtor. Why is this important? 1 out of every 4 home that's purchased requiring a mortgage is done through VA or FHA. Okay? It's 1 out of every 4 transactions where the mortgage is involved. And I'm telling you right now, the way this thing is written, there are no rules. This has not been figured out. This has not been done. Now, NAR is currently in discussion with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the VA and the FHA to determine options. But they're going to have to change all the rules. Fannie, Freddie, VA, FHA. So, and by the way, who are those buyers? They're the people with the least amount of down payment who need the most amount of representation and help. Okay? And that's why I'm saying this was not consumer driven. Okay? You also have then, what does it mean to a seller? Well, think about it. Like, everybody wants a deal. Everybody wants to know they're paying value for money. No one wants to be the dummy who's paying far more than everybody's paying. So sellers are going to start asking, and they're seeing all this media, and that you're experiencing this on all your listing appointments. Hang on, do I save on commissions? Are buyers represented or not represented? Do the buyers ask for the discount on the house based on the fact that the commissions are lower? How do we negotiate that? All of these things. So no doubt, the most confused people in this will be consumers, because on one hand it's, hey, great, we get it. I mean, who doesn't want a deal? Anybody who owns a house, great. You mean my fees I've been paying are way too high? Great, I won't have to pay those fees. Sounds great, sounds fantastic, and it does until it doesn't, because this isn't like booking a hotel room. There's a boatload of work to be done, physical work, manual labor. There's a difference here between many of these online businesses. Real estate's not an online business. It's a roll up your sleeves, get it done business. Inspections, disclosures, pushing the loans through, getting the details done, getting all the paperwork done, all time after time after time. The disclosures could choke a horse. We got all the inspections and appraisers and all that stuff, and everything throughout is a negotiation. So we're going to have to educate people. We're going to have to provide options for people. We're going to have to give people, okay, all kinds of options. You can do this, 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 or this, which to me, good agents always did. And so people are going to be asking, let's see, do the buyers pay the agent's fee themselves? Do they ask for the buyer's agent to be paid for as a concession by the seller? Or do they go direct and unrepresented? And I saw just this morning in the Wall Street Journal articles of a couple of people who represented themselves, and it worked out okay. And it can. And they're YouTubing, what do I do here and what do I do there? But basically, it's your full-time job. It'll be your full-time job to go do that and get that done. A little thought on this. Last year, 54% of all millennials needed some form of assistance with the down payment. I don't see these folks being able to pay a buyer's broker too. Very unlikely. So who's going to get hurt most in this is first-time buyers and the agents that represent first-time buyers. There it is. It's always the case. Unintended consequences. There will be a seasons of chaos. There will be times when listing agents try to take advantage of this. You're going to see models show up where people say, oh, I'll show you houses for $500 and I'll write your contract and negotiate it for $1,000. And so that kind of stuff will be out there. I believe for most people that will be a very frustrating process. But you'll see it. You'll see it throughout. Now, I'm 38 years in the real estate business. The people with the very lowest commission rate companies were always the first ones to go bankrupt during a downturn. When the market's high, I have no doubt, 20 offers over a weekend, over list price, great. Turkey can fly in a hurricane. But when the wind stops howling, people start hitting the ground. People are going to need to there's marketing for a home for a seller. There's advocacy on behalf of a buyer. Those two things are still going to be required by most people. So here's the major change, and I'm going to get into some practical stuff, and I know some questions coming in. I'll get to your questions. Here's historical real estate. Historical real estate was you had a seller who signed a listing agreement. Then the terms of the listing agreement, the compensation offer, was listed in the MLS. You had a buyer who historically always signed a buyer agreement, even at closing, but they always had a buyer agreement, and so that's how it worked. Now, just so you know, there is no third version of this coming. There's no, we're just going to start a national MLS off that's not affiliated with the National Association of Realtors. We're just going to do this company-wide. Let me say this. One of the things that's really strange about this ruling is you can talk about this commissions in a brokerage. You can talk with your own agents, but you can't talk with other brokerages. You can't talk company-wide. They don't want agents talking to agents because they believe this was collusion. How 1.6 million people colluded is bizarre, but that's what it's believed to be. And again, I'm going to go out and say this. People are afraid to say anything on this stuff because they're all afraid of getting sued. And maybe I should be, but I'm not. I just think this is the model. This is the way it was done. This is no longer the way real estate will function. And you can forget about any other version of this coming back. This is gone. The way real estate was done, the way I practiced real estate for a long, long time, gone. Here's post-settlement real estate. So now you have a seller who signs a listing agreement with the listing broker. You have a buyer who signs a buyer agreement that stipulates the commission or the amount of income to be paid by the buyer to the broker, the buyer-broker agreement. Nothing can be passed through the MLS. Now, you can post, for example, concessions on your own personal website or on your own social media. But it's all got to be done through the purchase contract. The purchase contract is everything now. Okay? So the listing broker can put available concessions into the MLS, and those concessions can go to cover the buyer's portion of the broker's fees, in addition to other closing costs, right? So again, FHA, VA has very restrictive rules on that. Certain conventional loans, a certain amount of concessions are allowed based on people who are putting 10% down, more if it's 25% down, those kinds of things. It's all going to have to get worked out in the wash. So the best way I could describe it is this, is that the residential real estate business is going to work like commercial real estate does today. If you represent a buyer, you're going to sign a buyer-broker agreement where when you first make the commitment to work together, the buyer is going to see a document and you're going to put down there how much you're going to be paid during the transaction. By the way, that has to be decided at that time, not at a later date, not during the negotiations, not during the purchase offer. It's like, here's how much you're responsible to pay me. Now, the way sellers are going to function is that sellers have the chance to go, yeah, I'm not offering any concessions of any sort. Yeah, you go ahead and do it. And if I'm a listing agent, I'm not going to do the buyer's agent's work for him. Just not going to do it. And therefore, because I'm not going to work for free. I mean, who would do that? So you're going to have buyers who are going to try to represent themselves. Okay, that's the Poseidon adventure. The seller won't know if they really have a deal, right? They got to get pre-qualified. They got to go through the process. Have they done all the disclosures? Have they done all the follow-ups? Is there a lawsuit coming after the deal? Okay. And so the errors and omissions insurance and all the stuff that we pay for. So you have that option. At the end of the day, the market's changed. And the market's changed right now. The market's changed since this lawsuit started. And now we're getting back to, we will see a very normalized market here when the rates hit 6% and below. And you'll actually see a number of sellers put their homes on the market. There's a huge pent-up demand to move. And so now all of a sudden, for the first time, a seller is going to have to compete with other listings. And so seller concessions are a marketing tool for a seller. That's it. And so the concessions can be, hey, we'll pay X amount of closing costs towards the buyer. And then the buyer can say, okay, those closing costs are going to go to pay my realtor and a few other things. So that's kind of how this thing is going to function. And so I think as the market changes here by the end of the year, we'll have some kind of normalization of working the way things were to some degree in regards to representation. You'll have more people represent themselves. I think you're going to have a few more lawsuits after transactions when that goes down. I think there's basically going to be there is more transparency required, and I think that's good. I mean, I never ever had a problem sharing with people. Here's what I charge. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. And so, the pathway forward, if you will, is going to require three things. You're going to have to do better lead generation, better negotiation, and better presentations. And so it's going to require a more professional approach to this business, which I've been advocating for 30 years. Okay, and we have 22,000 members. They do 10 times the business that their competitors do because they're very skilled at lead generation, especially working by referral. The online lead companies, there's actually specific stipulations that they have to pass the leads now to one specific realtor. And if those buyers that they're generated are like, hey, I just want to find my own home and I want to negotiate my own deal and I don't know that I need you. I'm looking for an online deal. I think the online lead companies are going to have trouble. So those of you who've been generating leads online, good luck with that. I think people who've been working by referral, as we've been teaching for a long time, are going to do even better. I think the consumer wants this. They want to be served well. They want their transactions to go well. Sellers want to get top dollar for their home. They want to be well represented. They don't want to quit their day job in order to do that. They want the transaction to go through as smoothly as possible, and they want no after effects after they move. And then by the way, 90% of sellers are going to be buyers. So then they have to be represented on the buy side, okay? So sellers become buyers. And so then it's like, okay, now the coin is flipped. Now we need to be represented. And so I think what you'll find is, there will be more efficiencies in the commission. I think the commissions will change and fee structures will change more rapidly based on condition of market. which it never did in the past, to be honest with you. I mean, you negotiated your fees and whatever else, but if you're dealing with percentages and it's 10-day market time, I worked at times in San Diego where it was 187 days was the market time to sell a house. And so you spent a fortune listing property, and we signed year-long listing agreements because it took so long to sell a house and then get a deal done. So I think you'll see that. But at the end of the day, much better lead generation activities. Good people know good people. Like, I got a fair deal. I was well taken care of. I paid this, and then they tell their friend. That's going to be even more so, especially seeing as the market's getting confused. Negotiation. There's negotiations now throughout the transaction. And with that negotiation on the buyer side especially, there's more transparency. Great. I feel like there's been poor negotiation practices here because hot markets do that, right? Warren Buffett, you don't know who's swimming naked till the tide goes out. I've participated in a number of real estate transactions in the last few years, and I met with, and in a transaction capacity, some of the poorest skills I've seen in my 3+ decades of the business. So it's going to be imperative to be highly skilled. And then presentation-wise, to be able to present to a seller, here's all your options. We can do A, B, C. Here's the menu. What do you want? Buyer, A, B, C, okay, or D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. But whatever it is, like, here's the options. Here's what the path forward. Here's how I represent people. And if that's a fit, great. If not, I understand. No problem. That's not too difficult how I've practiced for a long time. It's not too difficult how many of you have practiced for a long time. But it is a specific change, okay? And so I'm going to encourage people to this is happening mid-July. Get your act together now. This change is coming. It's happening. Don't be sloppy. There will be some unethical practices you're going to run into. You're going to see all kinds of strange stuff and people offering, I'll show houses for $500 or I'll make an offer for $750 or whatever. You'll see all that stuff. Bottom line, that stuff's been around for forever. Okay, so, but apparently that's all new to the outside world. So I would just say it really is time to step up your game. I'll say this. The late Dave Stevens, who was the president of the National Mortgage Bankers Association, he served in government for many years, in HUD and other places, and passed away from cancer a few months ago, sadly. And Dave was actually in the courtroom in Missouri, and he was there to witness the whole thing. And Dave and I have been friends for a long, long time. In fact, we had him on our mid-year bold predictions last year. And based on our discussions, we're like, this is not the case that should have come through, but it is the one that's going to go through. And it became apparent this was going to happen. So that's why Buffini and Company launched all of its assets and resources starting in October of last year to the Do It Now campaign, which we launched December 9th. And the Do It Now campaign was, the now stood for no chaos, own the listings, and win market share. And so you're looking at it now and you go, okay, we're heading for a season of chaos. We've been preparing you guys, especially our members, for this for a long time. And so if you want to eliminate the chaos, here's what you need to do. Identify the motivations of why people are moving in 2024. There are 10 specific top 10 reasons. We spent a fortune in the research. We had our entire team go through this and went through this list of the top 10 motivators of why people wanted to sell and move in 2024. We then built our entire marketing campaign, from our mailings to our e-reports to our social media posts, all built around identifying and target marketing those top 10 sellers. Why? Because one of the ways you can avoid the chaos is increasing your listing inventory. Where the changes really are coming is on the buy side. And again, you have to offer that menu to the sellers so that they know what the changes are. In fact, just so you know, we'll have further trainings on this. We'll have webinars on this, and many of you like our marketing, the items of value that are in the Do It Now kit. We'll actually have some educational pieces for your customer on how the real estate business has changed. So stay tuned for that. We're really waiting for the rules to be ratified in July. And then once that happens, you'll see we'll have some marketing resources for you so you can educate your customers, so the consumers can know what's up, what's actually happened, where is it at, not just some hearsay, not just some headline grabbing deal, what's actually taking place. So there will be more. We'll be providing more resources and training and all that kind of good stuff on that. And if you're new to us and don't really know, you need to go to the It's a Good Life website. You can go to buffiniandcompany.com. We provide basically the entire marketing suite with a CRM, with your mailings, your e-reports, your social media infographics, and then videos I actually record on your behalf that many people either recreate themselves or post for $150 a month. So for a cup of coffee a day. So it's all there, and it's all laid out for you. And we started this knowing what was coming down the pike. We were prepared, and we're seeing great results with our customers who are helping their sellers do a great job. And we're seeing people having 3 and 4 and 5-fold number of listing appointments that they were having. So we feel good that we've prepared our customers as best we can in a real estate business for this. And then and now the goal is for you guys to educate your customers as this ruling comes down mid-July. I want to take some questions. There is a lot more on this. It's a complex ruling, but simple changes. And so the law part of it is very complex, but the rulings at the end of the day, that little diagram I showed you is really where it's at. So, DJ, I'm going to open it up to some questions. I'm sure some folks have some things for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for this great information, this update. And as always, no matter what's happening out there, how crazy things get, I know, like you touched on there, I just feel better and better about how our clients are positioned because of information like this and the information that's coming, like you mentioned, because of things like the Do It Now campaign, because they have coaches in their corner. And one of the things I'm most excited about is because of our community, right? More than ever. I mean, this business is hard enough and getting harder by the minute to do things by yourself. And so we have this great community of our members that are able to support each other when things are going to get crazy and there's going to be burnout happening and all those things. So my encouragement to all our folks are lean into each other, lean into your coach, lean into this great community and get that support where you need it, because now more than ever, now is not the time to go it alone. Yeah. And it'd be really easy to feel like you need to do that. So great. Thanks for taking some questions as well. Got the lines are blowing up here. So if you have a question for Brian, you can call 442-232-6733. Again, we got a lot of questions coming in, so we may not get to everyone. If we don't get to your question, you can put it in the comments as well. And that goes to people that are tuning in, watching this recording later on. You can put your questions in the comments. We'll get answers to you. We'll respond to you as much as we can. But for now, you can call 442-232-6733. Our first question comes from Bill out in Phoenix. He has a question about what specific dialogues have you used in the past when it comes to this kind of negotiation, and what kind of dialogues would you recommend? So, so Bill, welcome to the broadcast. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Derek. Hi, Brian. Thanks again for this. In the 100 Days to Greatness and Pathway to Mastery, you did some great role playing on dialoguing with sellers and buyers. And I just wonder if you wouldn't mind off the cuff trying to do one now for us of how would you speak to a buyer about, negotiating the buyer broker agreement with them. Right. If you wouldn't mind giving us an off the cuff.
So I'm going to give you a general principle, because even though I'm not scared to talk about commissions, they're around like a roaring lion. Okay. And I'm going to, like I say, going forward, I promise to provide a menu of dialogues. Okay. But I'll share with you something that I think is totally appropriate, which is, as you may or may not know, but there was a ruling that came down that changed how real estate agents do business. And if I'm going to represent you as a buyer, we have to sign a buyer's broker agreement. And what that stipulates is that technically you're responsible for paying my fees to represent you. And I want to walk you through, first of all, what it is I actually will do for you, right? And so now there is, and we've seen the list, 60 to 100 tasks involved, and that's the published number, and all those kinds of things I've seen in a lot of places. And we've compiled lists ourselves at Buffini Company. I believe that you need to present, and Casey, I think you have a slide on this, like you need to present what your services are, like on a one-pager, okay? Like I'm going to do this, okay? So you're going to create a buyer presentation. You're going to simplify your buyer agent contract. You're going to have a one-pager that you need to show on services and compensation, okay? And then the second pager can be the legal terms and conditions so that everybody's good. But the bottom line is, it's like, hey, the business has changed somewhat. And so on the listing side, if you want to show the listing side case, it's you got to educate your sellers on concessions to the market. Concessions are a tool for the seller to sell their home. And so what is the way to get the most amount of money? You tell me, how can you get the most amount of money for a seller?
market it well and get it out in front of as many buyers as possible.
As many buyers as possible to make as many offers as possible, right? And so if there's going to be some buyers who choose to be represented by themselves. And by the way, a buyer who's representing themselves would be very smart to go, hey, there's no fees involved. By the way, I'm going to knock your price down. That's going to be one of the conversations. The other dynamic is you get to request in the seller concessions help for your buyer. And the help for your buyer can be your fees. It can be closing costs, all of that. And so, for me, I'm going to say to a buyer, look, there's 60 to 80 tasks. I think it would be unreasonable for you to expect me to work for free. I don't think you work for free. I don't think anybody works for free. And so what the game has changed here is that I have to sign a buyer's broker agreement with you that says, we put a deal together, we put a contract together, here's what the compensation will be. And that has to be stated up front. And then you let them know how you're going to go about doing that by putting it in the contract. You're going to put it in the contract and try to and negotiate on behalf of the buyer, their purchase, all the details, all the work, and then all the services it takes to represent them is also going to be part of the concessions. So I think, it'd be, there's 60 to 100 tasks. Give them a short list of just the biggest list. We'll be providing some resources on this in the months to come of the tasks that you have to perform as a buyer's broker. Secondly, I don't think it would be reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to ask anybody to go work for free. And so, thirdly, we're going to go and do this, and if I represent you, I'm going to ask the seller to make concessions to help you out with all the fees that you're responsible for, including the commissions. And so that's kind of how it's going to happen. Everything's about putting it in the offer. Everything's about the negotiation that goes through. There will be listing agents who will take a listing and who will say, we won't have to offer commissions and we won't have to offer concessions. There will be listing agents who do that. There will be listing agents who end up representing both sides. By the way, the number of lawsuits in the last 5 years regarding dual agency have just increased. I believe that's going to be one of the consequences. So you'll have, I believe, less than professional sellers, listing agents, are going to try to control the commissions. I've seen people in San Francisco who do a 3.5% listing and offer 0.5% to the buyer broker. All that kind of stuff. It's all gonna shake loose. You're gonna see everything under the sun. I think the one exception to the buyer's broker agreement is if there's a bonus paid by like a home builder. And if you're representing somebody on new construction, and then you got to go back to the buyer and say, hey, the builder's offering a bonus, and I'm willing to take half of that and have you have half of that, and all that's where the exceptions can be made to the buyer broker agreement. But the buyer broker agreement has to be signed up front. I think list the tasks, ask them, is it reasonable that someone would work for free, and then if they want this kind of representation, this is what it's going to do, and this is what it's going to cost, and I can. In the negotiations, ask for the seller in the concessions to help pay those costs, and or pay them in full. So that's going to be how you go about it. If that helps at all.
Helps greatly. Appreciate it.
You bet. Okay.
All right, great stuff. Our next question comes from Christina up in Sandy, Oregon. She has a question, understanding the concept of the buyer agreement, but then what happens if there's a difference between that and maybe what was out there on the seller side as far as concessions go? So, Christina, you're up. Ask your question for Brian.
Thank you, Derek. Hi, Brian.
Hey there, Christina.
So my question is, so let's say, we meet with our buyers or whatever, we sign a buyer broker agreement and we say, our fee's 2.5%.
Yep.
And then we go out and we show a home or whatever, and we find out that seller's paying 3%. So there's confusion because we had the buyer broker agreement at 2.5%, that we will only get the 2.5%, but then there's people saying, no, you'll get the 3%. So how will that work?
You'll have to rewrite your buyer broker agreement. You'll have to rewrite the buyer broker agreement. And there's also discussions about whether it can be percentages or open-ended fees or amounts and numbers. The dynamic also, one of the real tricky parts in this is that when it went through the MLS, it was a guaranteed compensation. When it's going through seller concessions, it's not a guarantee of compensation. For example, based on how the negotiation goes on price and terms, the seller can change the concessions. So that's again another gray area that's going to happen. The guarantees and those kinds of things that you knew through the MLS system and through you were splitting the fees with the listing agent. That's no longer the case. So again, what is seller concessions? It's a marketing tool for the seller. So, for example, what are we going to see in the future? You're going to see a situation. Let's say we get into a very hardcore buyer's market in the years to come, and sellers are having a hard time moving their properties. Well, a seller concession, it's a free market. I don't care what the Department of Justice says. The free market, someone who owns their home can incentivize whoever they want with how much they want in order to move. I need to move. I need to sell my home. I need to compete against these other listings. So when the market changes the other way, which it will and does, it's just we had one funky series of market conditions that then led into COVID. So we had an 11-year run-up. But the markets have gone up and down throughout my career, seller markets, buyer markets, all that type of stuff. And let's say we get back to a seller's market, you might see a seller offering 4%. And again, you're like, oh, hang on a second. In this particular case, this is what they're offering. You go back to the buyer. And again, now what I do like that it has to be transparent. Everything has to be discussed between you and the buyer. And I like that. But I would say if the amounts change, you're going to have to redo your buyer agreement and then submit it. But the offer is the key. If I was to give the big picture on this whole thing, like I say, the lawsuit's very complicated. This is how commercial real estate works. And commercial real estate, you sign the buyer-broker agreement. Everything's put in the contract. Everything's negotiated through the purchase, and then the deal goes forward. And that's kind of how this is going to work. Agents can promote the seller concessions and stuff through their own website, but not through the MLS. So that's the big one.
So then on, let's say, any of our offers besides, let's say, seller commissions or a rate buy down, we're also going to state in there that the seller to pay the buyer's commissions of 2.5%.
They won't say the buyer's commissions. I think I have to be exact on the language, but it's like basically seller concessions to help buyer's costs. And so those concessions are basically will cover the commissions that the buyer has agreed to pay in the buyer broker agreement.
Okay.
You get it?
Yes.
So it's not, in some ways, it's not radically dissimilar to how real estate's functioned for a long time. It's just the point of negotiation is not as cut and dry. It's not as clear. And that's why sellers and buyers, it's just going to be like people want to know that they're being treated fairly. And there was no standard practice. It's interesting now. Everybody said 6%, and that's why the real estate industry's had to be changed and the lawsuit had to happen. And now all the articles are 5 to 6%. Oh, okay. The President of the United States says for the first time, real estate commissions are negotiable. Now, somebody wrote that speech for him. And so that's the narrative. For the first time ever, commissions are negotiable. Commissions have been negotiable forever. It just was negotiated typically by the listing agent and the seller and then put into the MLS. And then it wasn't really much of a discussion between the buyer and the buyer's agent. And now it is. And so that's the big change. And so I would say this. Here's what I charge. Here's how I represent somebody. Here's what we're going to commit to. Here's how we're going to position an offer. And then when you go into an offer, again, I think you're going to see some shenanigans at offer time, and with the concessions and so on and so forth. But we're just going to have to kind of work through this till we get to a place where we get to a level of consistency in the marketplace.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Be good. Couple more.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, like I said, I got time for maybe a couple more here.
Great.
So
Okay.
I got a great question from our good friend Jason up in Calgary, and he wants to know, as I'm sure all of our neighbors to the north want to know, about the ripple effect for our friends up there. So Jason, you're on the broadcast, and if there's anything to add to that, go ahead there.
Hey, good morning, Brian, and thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I just wanted to know what you think will happen north of the border. I don't watch a lot of the news, but of course we hear the trickle effect of what's happening in the U.S. and Canada, so just want to know your take on what...
buyer-broker agreements have been in Canada for a long time, right? I mean, that's already been the case. And so, You have the different provinces and how business is done. I actually don't see much of a change in or influence, and there's normally tremendous connection between what happens in the States and Canada. The only thing you're going to see is there's a significant percentage of Canadian buyers buying second homes in the U.S., right? In 5 states in particular. And so Canadian buyers are going to have to be aware of how the game is now played in south of the border. So I think you're really not going to see much difference in Canada. Commissions have always been negotiable. People have always negotiated commissions. I don't see any difference in that. Like I say, I'm 38 years in the business, so it's news to me that commissions weren't negotiable. Why in the heck was I negotiating commissions all the time? Why did I? One of the things I was asked, they tried to pin me in the lawsuit. Hey, Mr. Buffini, you have 500 documents where you train on negotiation of commissions, and you have all these videos where you teach people how to present and charge their fees and negotiate their commissions. So you're part of the problem. I go, you just made my case for me. I teach people how to negotiate commissions. If commissions weren't negotiable, why in the heck would I teach anybody? So nothing's changed in that regard. It's just the ability to be able to articulate your value, communicate what your services are and what they cost. And I think, some people will be offering maybe a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 seller opportunity. That may be one of the things we start to see and are already seeing. So there might be more choice, and that's fine. I'm all about consumers having choice, but the agents have choice too. And I choose not to work for, like I say, people ask me to come and do speaking engagements. I spoke to 7,000 people last week in Vegas, and someone will ask me to go to an office meeting. Yeah, I'm not going to an office meeting. That's not really in my price point. You follow me? So I don't think much changing up north, except when the folks come down south. So you guys are good, and your market's already starting to look a lot better and healthier, and a leading indicator. And we got some news. We're actually thinking about doing an event in Canada late in the year. I'm not supposed to say that, but we're looking at dates right now. So stay tuned. We might even come up north and come see you folks. How's that?
Good. Well, we got room for you in Calgary.
All right, buddy. Great stuff.
All right.
Okay, DJ, who we got?
Okay, Brian. This might be the last one because we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go to Janet in Dallas. And you may have kind of touched on this, but I think it'd be good to kind of tie this whole thing home because she has a question about we're talking about things on the buyer side, but how's the discussion going to work on the listing side of things? So Janet, you are up. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much. Hi, Brian. How are you doing?
Janet. I'm doing good. I'll be out in Dallas this week. Looking forward to seeing you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we love you here in Dallas. I know everybody loves you, but we love you here. And I'm actually a licensed agent for about the same amount of time that you have been, but I have been on the title insurance side all this time. So we call on real estate agents. And as you can imagine, we are getting a lot of calls these days.
Yeah.
I'm a sales manager here, so I have about 20 sales reps that are calling on agents.
Yeah.
And we typically call on listing agents. So they are our customers. And so in these discussions, I'm curious what your thoughts are on listing agents having this discussion with their sellers, knowing that they cannot offer the compensation in the listing agreement, but they can offer the concession. So to be able to, do you think it's good for them to have these discussions up front with their sellers?
Oh, yes. They better. They better. I mean, the game's changed. I mean, to do it would be, malpractice. So first and foremost, I forgot to mention this, Janet, on our website, the it'sagoodlife.com, and I believe on buffiniandcompany.com. It's easier to find on it'sagoodlife.com. We're actually releasing the NAR Q&A, which has got some great information. So the National Association of Realtors has a Q&A there, and then we're also going to post the key settlement terms just so people have, okay? So that's first. Secondly, every seller needs to be educated. So first of all, sellers are reading all the articles. They're like, great. You're telling me, people have choices. People have in the stock brokerage business, people can pay full fee, there's a mid-range fee, and then you can pay per trade. You can choose it. Now, I happen to pay a stockbroker. Ben Stewart's my guy. He's been my guy for 20 years. And the reason being is I'm not going to live on a computer every hour of every day and go up and down with the anxiousness of every hour of every day and be a trader. That's not my deal. There's some people who are happy to do it, and there's companies make hundreds of millions of dollars providing that service. The same thing in real estate. So what we have to do is some sellers will be going, hey, I hear I don't have to pay a commission anymore, or I don't have to pay the buyer's fees anymore. That's great. Okay, so that's possible, but you need to know here's how this works. And so if I represent you on the sell side, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm going to charge you, okay? And on the buyer side, here's all the tasks that have to be done for a buyer. Now, if you want me as a listing agent to do that stuff for you, I'm going to ask you to compensate me, because I don't believe in working for free. Like this, this is like, you want me to double the work and double my liability, by the way, as a dual agent. And I don't even think dual agency is even allowed in Texas. And there's a number of states it's not. So people have to go and explain, hey, there is a change to the business. We need to incentivize people to look at your house. That's the bottom line. And one of the things about this is one of the rulings, the main ruling was that there was steering involved. Okay? Mm-hmm. That in the MLS, commissions were published, and real estate agents then drove buyers towards the houses that had the highest commissions. Now, you're in the business as long as I am. I don't know that I ever came across it. I'm sure maybe it was done by some people, but it was not a common practice. But that's basically what the whole premise of the suit is, to stop steering. Mm-hmm. And so, and again, just so you know, I mean, okay, let me put my commentary in here. There are hundreds of millions of dollars in legal fees going to get paid out in this. And I have seen some reports that say that the people in the class might get $50. So you tell me, who brought the suit? How did it work? Is this a great deal? Now, the DOJ is involved with the NAR. That's a totally different issue. But at the end of the day, what the requirement is that a seller needs to be educated on, A, here's how the business works. B, here's how the concessions are a marketing tool to get someone to bite and pay the most amount of money and give you the best terms possible for your house. And so that's where the concessions lie. And so everything revolves around the contract. I do think you're going to see more of a menu of services offered for sellers in hot markets for sure. But we have to get educated on this. We have to present it properly. I will continue to do so. It took me 50 minutes to kind of describe everything today. So we're going to continue with some webinars. I would encourage your title people to have the Realtors take a look at this Facebook Live. It'll be there. It'll be recorded. There's tens of thousands of people will watch this later on. So I would encourage you to get people to do that. So, and then this NAR settlement FAQ, I have it on the screen here. itsagoodlife.com/tools. Go into the tools section, and that's where you can see where the settlement agreement is. And there's a lot of FAQs that are very good. So between this podcast and this broadcast today, Facebook Live, that's settlement. And then we're going to do a series. There's other good information sources out there, but we're going to do a series of webinars, media pieces on this to educate, like people are asking me for dialogues and so on and so forth. Well, I can't get right back into the very problem we had before. You know what I'm saying? So, but choices, transparency, and the seller concessions are how I see this business functioning going forward if buyers are to be represented. And if buyers aren't to be represented, then to me, you're looking at let me put it this way. I wouldn't sell my home or any property I own to a buyer that's representing themselves, no matter what the offer is. Period. Not doing it. Me personally, as a consumer, as a homeowner, as a property owner, no chance I'm doing that. No more than I'm going to court to represent myself. So exactly. That's my choice, and that's how I would approach it with a seller.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. More to come on this. If you have questions, post them in here. The team and I will continue to direct resources to you. This is not the end of this story. The future of the real estate business is this, that really good professionals who really have their clients' interest at heart, who really cultivate referrals, will become the trusted advisor to people. You'll have a smaller number of agents making more money. There will be people leave the business. NAR MLSs will be rattled here for quite some time. And but good agents who do good business the right way, who are totally transparent about how they get paid and what they get paid for, will continue to prosper. And that's a fact. And there'll be all kinds of models and be all kinds of people offering cheapest services and this and that and the other. That's fine. That'll happen. But the market changes and the market comes and the market goes. And I know I've been in this business, like I say, almost 4 decades, and I know what lasts in this business. I know what works in this business, and I know what doesn't. And so this is the hand we've been dealt. We work with it. I don't think the business got better. I don't think the consumer got better, but it's now different. So roll up our sleeves, put our big girl, big boy pants on. Let's go to work. Do it now. Generate great leads. Be a great negotiator, and then present really well, and you'll do fine. So hopefully this has been helpful. More to come. There's a lot to cover. We'll talk to you soon.